Alright everyone, welcome to the Chess Kids webinar today. This is an extremely topical lesson. In fact, it couldn't be more so. We have on the screen here two players, Ryan on the left and Regan on the right. So we've got Ryan and Regan here. Now those are two of the best players in Victoria for their age. So they are excellent chess players. Both of them the best players at their school. And today there is an inter-school competition going on in Dandenong, and this was the round 3 game between these two players. They had to face each other off on the start of the 3rd game. Now Ryan's rating is a little bit higher, so was the favourite for the game. He was white in this game. But you can see how Regan put up an extremely good fight, and we're going to have a look at, well, and this game could have gone either way for a very long time. So we're going to have a look at this game that these two players have played, and we're going to try and learn a few things, because the mistakes that these guys make and the good moves that these guys are making are something that everybody at schools can learn from. I mean, they're the best player in each of their respective schools. So I think we can learn a lot from these guys. So we're going to the chessboard now. Hopefully you can see that chessboard start to pop up on people's screens. And we're going to go through this game. So remember, this is the 3rd round game. Both of these players are the best players in their school. So it's Ryan and Regan. And they are equal first in the tournament. They've both won all their games up until this point, and now they're going to take each other on. So we've got Ryan is white, and his first move is advancing his pawn to e4. So both players you would expect for the first few moves of the game to be playing some strong opening moves. They're both very experienced players. So here we have white's straight away, as soon as he can, sets up a wall of pawns in the center of the board. Now that pawn wall is an extremely strong formation. We call this opening the Scotch, or the Scottish opening, and that Scottish opening comes when that 3rd move, when that pawn goes up to d4 and sets up a pawn wall. There are obviously other moves that you could have done in this situation. He could have developed his bishop. That would have been an Italian opening, or if he developed his bishop a little bit further, that would have been a Spanish opening. He could have done all sorts of different things, but he's chosen in this game to do the Scotch opening, or the Scottish opening, and dominate the center of the board with a wall of pawns. Very attacking opening, excellent opening. Now, black has played this move pawn to f6, and a few people will straight away be able to see why that is a bad move, because it straight away opens up the square that is next to black's king, the weak spot. So we see the square that's 1 step diagonal from the king. I'll make that a yellow arrow so we can see that. The square 1 step diagonal from the king is only protected by the king and no other pieces. The knight, the bishop, the queen, the pawns, the rook, nothing else can cover that square. So that's the weakest square on the board. It's the easiest place for white to try and break through and get a checkmate. So when black moves his pawn forwards here, he's actually opening up that weak spot and making that area even more vulnerable for an attack. So what could he have done instead of that? Well, probably if it was me, I'd say, well, white's got a really strong wall of pawns. I don't want him to keep that wall of pawns. I'd much rather just take that pawn, do pawn takes pawn, and get rid of white's wall of pawns. And that would have probably been a stronger move for black, just to get rid of white's wall of pawns and then start developing some of his pieces. We're playing pawn to f6. Regan's opened up his king a little bit, and Ryan straight away sees this and he thinks, well, how can I take advantage of the fact that the king is open? How can I take advantage of that weak spot there and get my pieces, maybe my queen, which is his best piece, out to attack on that weak spot? So he plays pawn takes pawn, and pawn takes pawn, and then he tries sacrificing his knight here to get his knight out of the way and let his queen through and into the attack. All right, so sacrificing the knight to get his queen through and into the attack, check. So here we have the weak spot, now attacked straight through the weak spot by white's queen. So good plan by Ryan to sacrifice the knight to try and get his queen into the attack. What he probably didn't notice was that black can block this check pretty easily. If he blocks the check with the pawn, then things go very badly. Ryan takes the knight, check, and then next move is going to come down and take out black's rook in the corner of the board. So things are not going to go well for Regan then, when white's queen has now got the check and winning the rook, a fork. So if we go back a few steps, there is a good move here though to get out of the check. So when you're in check, three things to think about. First of all, can you take the piece that's attacking you? If you can't take it, can you put something in the way to block? And thirdly, if you can't block, can you run away? Now, black definitely doesn't want to run away. He doesn't want to move his king. It's the last option. You only want to run your king away if you've got no other choices. But the best move, and an easy move for black here, Regan's a very experienced player. He noticed that, oh, yep, I can just save my knight by retreating the knight back there, block the queen off, and now the queen can't come through and attack the king via the weak spot anymore. So was that sacrifice from a couple of moves ago a good idea? Should Ryan have sacrificed his knight to get his queen into the attack? Well, I think, turns out, no, because he doesn't have any other pieces supporting his queen. White's got his queen in a good spot. Ryan's got his queen developed and attacking. That's great. But all of his other pieces are still sitting on the back row. His knights and his bishops are not helping the queen. If the knights and the bishops were in the attack as well, then he might be able to keep this attack rolling and keep maybe threatening a few more things and go for a checkmate. But as it is, with none of his pieces developed, only his queen in the attack, black finds it too easy to defend. So really, you shouldn't be sacrificing to go for an attack unless you've got lots of pieces developed. And here, black just finds it too easy to defend. So white's next move, plays pawn to f4. He's got a little threat. He wants to advance that pawn forwards again, attack the knight, because now that knight is pinned. Okay, this knight that's on g6, it can't move away, because if it moves, the queen's going to be attacking the king. All right, so the knight is sort of stuck in spot. It's pinned to that spot. It can't move away. So Ryan's got a good idea of moving his pawn up to attack that knight. But again, we're going to find that white's queen being all on its own, having one or two pawns to help, really isn't enough. The queen's on its own, doesn't have an attack quick enough. So Regan plays knight f6, which is an excellent move, moving his knight to attack Ryan's queen. And now Ryan finds that while he's got his queen into the attack, because he's got no pieces supporting him and he can't really keep that attack going, the tables have turned. He's sort of backfired. Instead of his queen being a good attacking piece, now the queen's being threatened, and the queen's going to have to move, and then it's going to get threatened. It's going to have to move again. So Ryan's going to spend the next few moves running around with his queen instead of developing his other pieces and getting more pieces into the attack. So these two knights that Regan's moved, those two knights are in now excellent positions, keeping black's king safe and also threatening the queen. Ryan plays queen f5, trying to keep his queen in an attacking position, but if it was me, I think I would just be retreating my queen right back to where I came from. Maybe not all the way back to d1, but at least to e2, so your queen's safe behind that wall of pawns. I mean, Ryan's still got a strong wall of pawns here in the middle of the board, but having his queen out there, it's just going to mean his queen is very vulnerable, leaving his queen out here. All right, black's next move. I don't know, feel free if anyone's got any suggestions, type those suggestions into your chat box and let me know what move you think black might play here, which Regan did play. He played this move. Got a couple of suggestions. Give you another second or two to think about what you might do if you're black. All right, so the correct answer, and like I said, we've got a couple of suggestions, but we haven't picked the right one yet. The best move, which is the move that Regan played, was pawn to d5. All right, by advancing his pawn forwards here, he's attacking in the center of the board. He's also releasing his bishop to threaten black's queen. So remember that that queen, raised queen, is out a little bit too early. Right? It's easy to be threatened. So by advancing the pawn to d5, that's a great spot for the pawn, right in the middle of the board, and freeing that other bishop up to come and threaten the queen. So that's the best move, and that's the move that Regan played. I mean, both of these guys are following mostly the 3 golden rules, but even though they're the best players in their school, there's still more work that they can do in terms of always following those 3 golden rules. Now, we've talked about them before, and we talk about them again and again, because it's easy to understand them, it's easy to say that you know them, but then when you're playing a game, to actually follow those rules in every single move that you're playing is pretty hard. It's pretty tricky. So, Ryan definitely knows he should be developing all his pieces. And you can see his bishops and his knight on the back row are not developed. But his queen's under pressure, so he's got to keep moving his queen. He doesn't have time to develop his pieces. Right? He knows he should be controlling the centre, and that's probably why Regan's played pawn to d5, is to dominate in the centre of the board. That's an excellent move. All right, so the queen's in danger. Got to move his queen away again. All right, after white's moved the queen, black now has to think about what he could do. If it was me, I would probably in this position just use my knight to take that pawn. Now, that opens up the possibility of a queen for queen trade. And if you're black here, you're ahead on pieces, right? Because remember, Ryan sacrificed his knight at the start of this game. So Regan's ahead by a knight, right? You can see here, there's only one knight on white's team, and black's got 2 knights. So swapping off queens when you're ahead on pieces is actually a good thing. It makes your job easier to win in the endgame because you're ahead already by pieces. Also, white seems to still be attacking. His queen's out there, his pawns are wanting to move forwards. So swapping off queens also makes it a lot harder for white to keep on attacking. All right, so if it was me, I'd be just saying, I'm Regan, I'm just going to do knight takes pawn, gets my knight into a really good spot in the middle of the board, tries to do a queen for queen trade, gets an extra pawn, lots of good things about that move. Instead, Regan plays bishop e7, which is also still a good move, right? Preparing himself to castle. Right? So there's empty space now so the black's king can get himself safe. So you're allowed to castle as long as you haven't moved your king. Right? I know black's been in check before, but that still means you're still allowed to castle because he hasn't moved his king. So if you've been in check and blocked it off, you can still castle. So he's preparing himself to castle. He's also putting the bishop in line with Ryan's queen, so that if Ryan isn't careful, the knight can move and there'll be a discovered attack on the queen. All right, Ryan keeps on trying to attack. Pawn to f5, threatening that knight. Black plays knight takes pawn, which is an excellent move. Knight's now threatening. White's queen. The bishop's threatening White's queen. So let's just put this to one side. So I'm just fiddling around with a couple of things here. All right, so we'll keep on going. So yeah, that queen is in a lot of danger now, threatened by the bishop and the knight. And how many times is that the queen's had to move now? So the queen has to move again, and that's been at least 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, maybe 5 or 6 times out of 11 moves in this game. Nearly half the moves in this game have been with just that one queen. Right, so Ryan's got his queen out, he's attacking with his queen, but black's got way too many pieces developed, way too many pieces off the back row and into the attack. There's no way that white can get through with just one queen. It's just not enough pieces to get into the to get any sort of successful attack. Right? White has to get these pieces off the back row and into the attack before he's got any chance of really doing any danger to black. All right, so what's black going to play now? His knight's in danger. This knight here. His knight's in danger by the pawn, and well, the move that he played here, bishop check, is sort of the same mistake that Ryan played at the start. He's bringing his bishop out here and putting white in check, okay, attacking along the weak spot. But it's too easy for white to defend this. Really, because this knight here is pinned on g6, black's only got two pieces, the bishop and the knight, that he can use to attack black's king. All right, so 2 pieces is really not enough to get a checkmate. All right, white's going to have way too many pieces hanging around his king to defend himself. So what black should be doing is bringing some more pieces into the attack. All right, so I know you're going to lose that knight, but it's better to let the knight go and try and get a few more pieces developed off the back row into the attack. Probably the best move for black might be like knight going back to f6, attacking the queen again, and then just developing the bishop, castling, developing the queen, and once all of the pieces are developed, then go for the checkmate attack. All right, so after the check, easy for white to block. Ryan just plays pawn to g3, blocking off the attack, and again the same mistake that Regan's making here is attacking, going for a checkmate attack, but with not enough pieces developed. So he sacrifices the knight, take, and gets his bishop now, attacking along the weak spot, putting white's king into check. So it looks good, you've got the check. Once white's out of check though, how can white actually finish this game off and get a checkmate? And it's not really possible because he's only got one piece attacking. All right? One piece can never checkmate your opponent's king. He needs to get the bishop, the queen, probably the rooks, maybe unpin his knight as well. Then if he had 3, 4, 5 pieces in the attack, then he's going to have a checkmate. All right, black's move clever. Regan's got a bit of a threat here. His next move is going to be queen right down to e1. It'll be protected by the bishop if he goes there, and that will be checkmate. So there is a nasty threat for Regan, but as long as Ryan can see it, he can easily find a way of defending it. There's lots of ways to defend and stop that threat. Ryan played probably the best one, bishop to d3. Excellent move because it's developing another piece off the back row. So now white's got the queen, the bishop, and that pawn's a little bit useful as well. So, but mainly the queen and the bishop off the back row and attacking. He's also using the rook in the corner, both for defense and also to help in the attack. All right, so Ryan's using his rook to stop the checkmate, developing a piece at the same time. Excellent move, excellent move. All right, the next move that Regan plays was bishop takes pawn. Probably the losing move in this game. I'd say he was winning in this position still pretty easily, but after bishop takes pawn, there's nothing protecting that bishop. It can just get taken back. So he's just lost the bishop for nothing. So what could he have done instead? Well, the best move that I thought about when I was watching this game was to put the queen up here into e5. Now, we know he's going to lose this knight on g6. Ryan can play takes. Regan can now swap off the queens so that it doesn't have to worry about being attacked anymore. All right, swap off the queens. Black can then play this nice check and attack the rook at the same time, a fork. Bishop blocks. Swap off takes, takes, and the king moves here. So this is what would happen after all the smoke clears. We'd end up in this position where black's got 2 rooks, 5 pawns and a bishop. White's got 2 bishops, knight and a rook, and only 3 pawns. So on material, on points, black is still technically 1 point ahead. A rook is worth 5 points, a bishop is worth 3, and pawns are worth 1 each. So we go 5 plus 5 is 10, 13 for the bishop, 16, 17, 18 points altogether when you count the pawns. Bishops and knights are worth 3 points each, rook is worth 5, pawns are worth 1. So we've got 17 points for white. So technically black is ahead on material by 1 point, but the main reason that he's probably winning this game is he's got a pawn here, which can zoom through towards the end of the board. White still has a lot of pieces that are sitting on the back row not really doing anything. Right? So if black can get his rooks attacking, his bishop attacking, right, quickly enough, all of white's pieces is going to be locked out of the game and not really be able to take part in this game at all, and then black's pawn can get through to the end. So that would, if we go back a few steps all the way back to here, that is tricky to see all of those things from here, to be able to think, 5, 6, 7 moves ahead. But the main principle here is that, well, black should be trying to get more pieces off the back row and developed, get all his pieces working, and the move that he played, bishop takes pawn, just leaves his bishop completely unprotected, and so he's just lost a bishop for nothing. So he just had to find a move that didn't lose any of his pieces, and he probably would have been okay in this game. All right, let's see what happens then. As a way of trying to protect this knight, because the threat is that the bishop takes the knight. If the pawn takes back, the queen's taking the rook. So there's a pin there on this pawn here. This pawn on h7 is pinned. It can't take back because he's lost the rook. So as a way of unpinning the pawn, Regan moves his king. So now if it's a swap off, the queen's still. Sorry, this rook is now protected by the other rook. All right, Ryan's played bishop takes knight, and it's probably a good idea to try and get rid of a few pieces here, because it looks like black, even though white's trying his hardest to attack, black's got 3 pieces attacking, and white's only got 2 pieces off the back row attacking. So it really does look like white's probably the one who's got to swap off pieces, because black's the one who's more in a more attacking position. So bishop takes knight's a good move. Pawn takes back, now threatening the queen with the rook and with the pawn, and has to also be careful, because if the rook in the corner gets taken, then black's still got this nasty queen e1 checkmate being threatened. Ryan missed a chance to win this game here. He moved his queen back and put him in check. There is a winning move here, which gives checkmate in just a few moves, almost unstoppable. The way to find the checkmates is to look for what we call forcing moves. And a forcing move is any move that takes a piece or puts your opponent into check. Right? Checks and captures are the 2 moves which change the course of the game. So if we think about it in this position, all the different possible checks and captures, Ryan could have taken the rook, could take the pawn, could take the pawn here. He could play queen here check, which he played in the game. He could play queen f5 check. He could play rook f1 check. So there's 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 different moves he has to try and consider. Right? You've got to think about all of those different moves. It doesn't necessarily mean one of them's guaranteed to be a good move, but all the good moves in the game that you ever play are always going to be forcing moves. They're either going to be check or capture. Okay? It doesn't mean that every forcing move is a good move, but every good move is a forcing move. All right? So just try and get your head around that one, that you have to play a forcing move. You've got to do check or capture. If you want to get checkmate, it's got to be a check. If you want to win a piece for nothing, win your opponent's queen, it's got to be with a capture. So you have to look for all of those checks and captures at every step of the way. So now when you've got lots to choose from, you've got to think through, well, which is going to be the best one? And the best ones to look at to start off with have got to be the ones which take a piece and put black in check at the same time. And there's only 2 of those possibilities. So queen takes pawn on g6. Well, no problems for black, just takes you back. So the best move, queen takes d5. Now if we have a little bit of a look, a couple of moves ahead, queen takes d5. Right. Black has to get out of check. Not many choices. He's in check. Kill, block or run. Could block. All right. Then the rook moves across check again. King moves. Bishop moves check. And with all of those checks, black's king can't move to the left or the right because the rook and the queen. Right. Has to move back. His queen's gone and there's checkmate. Okay, so that's one scenario that after the check, black's king's in the middle, the rook and the queen attacking on open files, the bishop zooms into the attack, and all of a sudden, white's winning this game. The other option is that black's king can move back. Right? If black's king moves back, Ryan's just got a simple check, queen blocks, check, king moves, and then rook takes the queen checkmate. So very quickly, those two pieces that are attacking can deliver a checkmate. Right? The two most powerful pieces, the rook and the queen. All right, so let's go back here, and Ryan's missed that opportunity to take the pawn, and instead has just played queen f3 check, right? Which is good because it's keeping the attack going. It's check, but black can now put his queen in the way, and he's got defense with his queen. Queen takes pawn check, king moves, and unfortunately this rook can't come across here to attack down the open file here because black's bishop is just waiting there, stopping him. So that's what's worked out well for black. All right, Ryan does a rook for rook trade and sees a way that he can win black's queen now. All right, see the queen and the king are in the same line as one another. So we can say, oh, look at that line. Queen and king are in the same line as one another. So you can use that with pin. The bishop now attacks the queen. If the queen moves away, it's check. Beautiful pin, and now Regan's queen is gone. Regan just doesn't give up fighting, which is really an excellent thing to see. He's always fighting. He's always attacking. He's going, oh, I've got my queen's in danger, but how can I make a comeback? And he's played this excellent move here, rook d8, which now pins white's queen. So he's going to lose his queen, but he's going to win white's queen. Okay, so then that happens. His queen's gone, black's queen's gone. White queen sacrifices himself. I guess if you're going to lose your queen, you may as well get something for it. And now we're deep into the end game. As soon as players' queens are gone, it's the end game. And the main thing in the end game is how can you get a pawn to the end of the board. And black's got two pawns on the king side, which have got the potential to zoom through and turn into queens. Right? So that's the main thing. As soon as the queens are gone, it's like, well, all right, great. How can I get one of my pawns to the end and get a new queen? So black's thinking about how he can get those two pawns through to the end of the board. Now Ryan's an excellent endgame player. I know he's been doing a lot of coaching with us and has obviously been doing a lot of lessons on endgames with Carl, and so played some really good moves here. First move, king e2. Excellent. So his king is heading over, right, towards these pawns to stop those pawns from moving forwards. The best way to stop a pawn moving forward is just to put your king in front of it, because then the pawn can't come through. Pawn's blocked off by the king. So king up, excellent move, just try and stop black's pawns from moving forwards. The other reason that king e2 is an excellent move is that in the endgame, you need your king to be an attacking piece. If you leave your king on the back row, you're a whole piece behind. Like black here, if black just uses his bishop, Regan can use his bishop and his pawns, but that's nowhere near as strong as using his king, his bishop and his pawns. Right? It'd be like leaving the king on the back row. It'd be like white never using this rook in the corner of the board. Just a complete waste. So king e2 is an excellent move. And you'll see that both black and white are trying to use their king as an attacking piece. And as soon as the queens are gone, endgame, you need to use your king as an attacking piece. All right, rook g1, attacking that bishop, pawn forwards, and then another excellent move here, king f3, stopping that pawn from moving forwards. So this pawn blocked now. This pawn's going to find it difficult to come through as well, because if it ever gets to g4, it's going to get taken. All right, so the pawn moves up, and now Ryan sacrificed his rook here for that bishop. It's still winning, but the easiest way to win would actually just be to move the knight in there, and then either use the knight to take the bishop or use the knight to take the pawn. All right? Swapping knight for bishop, that's 3 points for 3 points. Swapping a rook for a bishop, that's 5 for 3. So he's giving Regan a chance to get back in the game, which he doesn't need to do. Right? He doesn't need to do that because he's only got one knight. Now if somehow Regan can get rid of all of those pawns, it'll just be a knight and a king against a king. Right? If all the pawns swap each other off, and a knight can't checkmate a king. It's not powerful enough. So there is a little bit of a chance here for Regan, if he can keep fighting, to get a draw. All he has to do is get rid of all his opponent's pawns. Ryan's too clever for that. He keeps that passed pawn blocked, moves his knight in to take that passed pawn, and now Regan heads his king across to the other side of the board to try and get rid of some of those other pawns. His passed pawn didn't work, so they're going to try and use their kings to head over to the queen side near all those pawns. So excellent plans, both players using their kings as attacking pieces in the endgame, and Ryan's knight is now that the king's in the attack, going to start hopping over and helping as well. Okay, so here comes the knight into the attack, and there's a really clever checkmate possibility here, which he didn't play, but I'm just going to show that to you anyway. If he moves his knight out of the way, right, Black's king's pretty much cornered himself. Right? His king can't move anywhere at all. So the only thing he can do is to move his pawn forwards, check. White moves his king out of the way. Pawn takes pawn, and then White's got Black in checkmate because Black's cornered his own king, and there's a checkmate. That's a tricky checkmate to see, but there we have the check. King can't take, can't block, can't move anywhere. It is a very sneaky checkmate, very tricky to see from here, and the move that Ryan played still won this game, so that was fine. So it was also a good move. Pawn to b3 check, swapping off pawn for pawn. Now, we don't want to swap off too many pawns because remember, if Ryan loses both of those pawns, it's a draw no matter what. Okay? Pawn forwards. And now Ryan just makes sure that he's going to at least save one pawn. So he sacrifices one to get two. Right? And now, by using his king to cover off all of these squares, so Black's king can't get in, he's got a free spot for his pawn to run all the way through to the end of the board. So just very quickly, we'll see how the game finished off. White's pawn zooms down the board and turns into a queen. All right. Once he's got a queen, it's just a matter of cornering the king. So the first move, excellent to set up a line, an electric fence all the way along that line. So Black's king is stuck on the right-hand side of the board, and then slowly marching his king in as well. Once he's got a chance, he puts his queen on the second rank. Again, another electric fence, so now Black's king is locked just onto those two squares. That's the only thing you can do is just move left, right, left, right, left, right. There's nothing else you can do. And while he's moving backwards and forwards, Ryan can just move his king in and then use his king to support the queen to give a checkmate. All right, so excellent game by both players, both of them trying to attack, but both of them making the same mistakes in the game. And now you've seen them make their mistakes. This was in the board number 1. They're both undefeated in their interschool competition when they were playing each other in this round. They're both the best players at their school, and you've seen the mistakes that they're making, so you can also learn from those mistakes and not make them yourself. Right? Ryan and Regan had to make those mistakes themselves to learn from that. You guys just get to watch that game, see the moves that were played, and learn from their mistakes. So make sure if you are going to attack somebody, you get all your pieces into the attack first, develop all your pieces before you go for an attack, because at the start of the game, Ryan's queen was out, thinking he's attacking, but only a queen, not enough pieces, no one else supporting him, so he wasn't able to get the checkmate, and then his queen was the one that was in danger and had to retreat. Then Black did the same things, tries to attack, sacrificed a piece to try and get a checkmate, but found most of his pieces were still on the back row as well. So make sure you get all your pieces into the attack, and then you're going to be able to get the checkmate. If you're looking for a really powerful move, we saw a couple of moves that were opportunities that were missed, and those were all about forcing moves, where you're putting your opponent in check or taking a piece. So look for all of those forcing moves. All right, guys, that's it for today. Thanks very much for being on the line, and I will be, as always, sticking around for a little while to answer some questions if people have any questions.